All right, welcome to the Apprentice Spotlight series. This is going to be episode number 3. We've got a really great guest for you. Now, in the interest of expanding this platform, one of the things that I decided to do was I was going to increase the social media reach of it. Now, Reddit is going to be, I can already tell, one of the best social media platforms for the podcast, because that's how Jermaine Marshall, our guest for this podcast episode, got connected with me. It was through Reddit. Now, what follows, the podcast episode that follows, is a very engaging and dynamic conversation between me and a very smart, energetic young man who has got a good head on his shoulders, and his trade is better off for it, and so is he. He is going places. Come on in the studio and let's listen in on this conversation. Take it for what it's worth. And if you are somebody who would like to have a platform, would like to come on this podcast, give us your story, just like Jermaine gives us his, and be able to spread it out to other young people to change the narrative, to provide people with viable opportunities and options outside of the, regurgitating that you got to go to college to get a good job. And even as good as the military is, that there are other options. Be sure to let me know, whether it's through Reddit. You can go over to the contact page and let me know, but let's have a conversation. I'd love to give you a platform. I'd love to be able to spread this out, and I'd love to have a number of apprentices come on here and let's just talk. Because no matter what people think about young people, you guys are the future. Keep that in mind as we listen to Jermaine give us his story. Come on in the studio.
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool. So he came up through the apprenticeship program a few years after I did. I got a few gray hairs, so I'm a little older than everybody else, but no problem. So he came up through the program, and so I've always, had a semi connection with the pipe fitters for obvious reasons. And my youngest brother is a high voltage lineman, so our entire family is just stock full of trades. So
That's great. Hopefully,
yeah,
you got one for every different one. That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. So if you don't mind me asking, so I saw where you were following on Reddit. Is that how you came across the platform and how we got connected, or how did that kind of
Yes,
work
it
with you?
was. There was a post you made in one of the subreddits. I have it on my phone. I can't recall which one it is, but in there you were responding to another person, and you mentioned your podcast on there. And I figured, that's great. I'll go ahead and check that out because, especially being relatively new to the trades, I'd say. I'm always looking for resources to go and hear other people talking about their experience, see if they have any advice that I might need to take into account, things like that. So that's all you mentioned in your podcast. Figured I'll go over there and give it a look.
So which ones? I mean, you don't have to give me the whole entire list, or if you've only listened to one. But did you listen to one of the Apprentice spotlights, or
Yes, at least for all your podcasts, I got up to the first one. I think I have 2 or 3 minutes left on that one. Then I'm off to the next episode.
awesome, awesome. Well, first off, I want to say thanks for taking the time to come on. I really appreciate having
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come here and talk with you.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny to me because the last one. So if you've only gotten to the first one, there is another one coming up. There's another Apprentice Spotlight, and so both apprentices I know personally. I wanted to get them to kick this thing off so I can get more
Okay.
exposure. And the second one, when you get to it, you'll hear him say something like, "Hey, look, I really just appreciate the opportunity to tell my story because not most people they just don't care." Out in the Gen Pop. So it's pretty fun actually to what I would say is have that conversation. Let's go ahead and jump right into the first question that I've got. You had the chance to look over the questions, right? Just
Yes, I
kind of kick
did.
you around. Okay. So I'm not very rigid on it, but I just like to try to give people a thought to kind of kick some things around a little bit and ask some questions. And, I usually give the apprentices, look, take the time. Tell me about your background. Tell me about how you grew up. Tell me, because you may have had some trade stuff in the background with family. Maybe you didn't. So just take, 5 minutes, whatever it is you feel like you need to inform me and everybody else who might be listening.
All right, no problem. All right. Well, my name is Jermaine Marshall. I'm 23 years old. I'm going through the United Association Union as a plumber. Our local has plumbers, pipe fitters, and HVAC and R. I've been in the Army for about 5 years now. I actually signed my re-enlistment 2 months ago, I believe it is.
Okay.
I was a firefighter for a volunteer firefighter for about 3 years. When it comes to the trades, my dad's a plumber, not union. He's got his own business. He also works with my uncle. Same deal with him. He's got his license, got his own business. They're over down in Florida. And growing up, that's how I got into the trades, or at least that was my exposure to them, is mostly my dad. When I was a kid, sometimes he'd take me on jobs, and they'd usually be little ones, like maybe going and changing out somebody's faucet, putting in a garden spigot, and things like that. And as I got older, he brought me to other projects, like when it came to new construction, putting in drain fields and thing like that. And as I kept getting older, he'd bring me to bigger jobs. Eventually, he'd leave me alone on some of them, like with a backhoe to get the drain field started, for example.
Hmm.
Um, I was born in New York, lived there for a couple of years, spent most of my life in Florida. Uh, Throughout high school, I went to a high school in Alabama and graduated there. That's where I actually enlisted in the Army initially. I went through basic in August of 2019, I want to say it was. Completely finished up the rest of my training in AIT in 2020. I got ready for a deployment later that year and actually left country in 2021, I want to say it was. Deployed to Africa. I got to go to Kenya, which was a great place. I'd go back there on deployment anytime. I loved it there. I got to another place called Djibouti. I had the complete opposite experience there. It wasn't nearly as much fun for me. I didn't like it as much. It was just not fun. I'll leave it at that. After I came back, I moved from Alabama to Tennessee. At the time, I complained a lot about living in Florida, and my sergeant, who was there with me, he eventually got tired of it. And one night when we were all sitting around drinking, well, they were. I can't stand the taste of alcohol. I'm a lightweight in that regard as well. And he got tired of me. He looked over at me and said, "Listen, man, I'll bring you over to Tennessee, get you a job set up there, something to get you out of Florida, but you gotta stop. I need you to stop complaining about this. I'll do whatever I can to help you, but you need to stop." I looked over him, I shook his hand, and said, "That's a done deal." And as we got back, he even took me into his home, which I found out later was not in Tennessee. It was actually in Georgia, but it's like right on the borderline. So there's like
Mhm.
about 5 minutes between the states. But he brought me into his home. He gave me a place to stay for a couple of months. His family was very welcoming, and they got me set up to go and stay over at the fire station. They had a living program over there, and I did that for a while. He got me a job originally as a mover, because one of the friends that he had in the army owned a moving company. So I worked for them for, I want to say it was about 6 or 7 months, until I went on Google one day. I said, I need to go and find a plumbing company, because originally that's what I wanted to do, was get into a trade. But going into a new state and everything, I wasn't very knowledgeable about anything around me. So I went on Google one day, looked for just how to get into a plumbing company, and I joined an open shop. And I was with them for, I think that was for about 9 months or so, until, and this is going to go into how I actually got into the union. We went on a job one of these days, and it was for a guy who was a retired union member. He was a steam fitter, if I recall correctly, and he retired after about 30 years, I believe.
Hmm.
And while we were working on his water heater, it was an electric water heater. The journeyman that was with me, he had to go and talk on the phone to get customer service and go through all the warranty and get permission to fix it and all. I noticed that he had a fridge, and it was just a bunch of stickers on there about all the different locals he's worked with, job sites he's been on, and things like that. And he
Hmm.
caught me looking, and he came over and he started asking me, "Oh, hey, have you ever thought about joining the union?" And yeah, I told him I had no idea what a union was, because I didn't. That was the first time I was ever hearing it. And that was like his bright eye starry moment. He took the time, he looked at me, and he went over everything. He went over the jobs that he's been on, how the union has helped him. He lived in a pretty nice house. It was modest, but it was very well. It was a two-story house. He had a nice car out front. He looked like he was really enjoying himself. And so he started talking to me, it's about, well, with the union, I get X, Y, and Z benefits. The pay is good. I get health insurance, so, like dental, eye vision, all of that. And, he just kept on talking to me. And I'm just over there eating it all up because that sounds exactly like what I thought, being an open shop was. I didn't know there was a difference between the two. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know there was like an open shop and a union thing. I thought they were the same thing. And after you explain that to you, I was like, wow, I got to get over to union. This isn't the place that I want to be. It wasn't a bad company, mind you. It's just, it wasn't what I was looking for.
Right.
And
Right.
before we left, he he took my number and he said, listen, if you ever do go through with going to try and join this apprenticeship, I'm willing to write you a letter of recommendation or, whatever you need to get in, I'm willing to help with that. And he all left. And after that, I went online, started looking up which unions are closest to me, and it was Local 43 here in Chattanooga. And I went the apprenticeship process with that interview and everything. I'm pretty sure we'll talk about more specifically about how I did things that I had to do and such. But I think that's about it for my background. Just been moving around a lot. And a little interesting thing about me is if everything goes the way it's looking to, this will be the first year since 2021 that I've been in the US for like a 365 days straight. Every other year I've been out somewhere, whether it's Djibouti, Kenya, we went to, what was it, Guatemala in 2020, and then Philippines last year. So this might be the first year that I'm actually gonna, stay here in mainland.
So I'm in Virginia, and the largest military presence anywhere in the country is right here where I'm at. 20 minutes away, I could be at the largest naval base in the world in Norfolk. So we hear places, but it's never like Kenya. It's always it's always places over in the Middle East, wherever there's a port. It's
Right.
wherever a carrier group can find. That's because it's predominantly Navy, even though every single branch of the military is represented here. It's predominantly Navy, and so you'll hear places. Oh, I'm going over, to someplace in the Middle East where there's a port, and it's never Guatemala or it's never Kenya, whatever. I have heard Djibouti before,
Yeah.
so places like that. But there's other places where I'll hear guys that will talk about going someplace and it's like 140 degrees, and I'm like, no, thank you, no thanks, brother. I don't want any parts of that.
Yeah.
So,
Oddly enough, Djibouti and Kenya, both of the camps that I were at, both of them were ran by the Navy. They were owned and ran by the Navy.
yeah, it doesn't surprise me one bit. It's just the overwhelming number of people. Trying to think of the base that's over in the Middle East, Bahrain. That's it. I was
Mhm.
sitting there trying to think. I know there's a lot of guys that I've talked to over in the past, 5, 6 years that'll say, okay, I'm going to Bahrain for 6 months or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, 6 o'clock in the morning, it's like 130 outside. I'm like, no, thanks. No, thanks. It just, blows my mind that, I mean, people clearly live in those conditions, but that's not at all something that I want. I routinely tell people all the time, and I mean it too. I tell you, I hate summer with a passion because
You
it's
and
from a
me both.
it's from a practical perspective. I used to joke. I used to hold up a bottle of Gold Bond, and people were like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "This is the best tool I have in my toolbox because when you walk around like it's high noon and you like you're Yosemite Sam because you got swamp butt, and it's just like it's summer's just not a good season. So to hear other people talking about going overseas and at 6 o'clock in the morning it's 130 degrees, I'm like, no thanks. No, I'm
Yeah,
good.
it can be a pretty miserable experience.
I'm like, no, it's good. So okay, so you're obviously your family come up for the trade, and this is one of the reasons why I ask people, hey, look, tell me about your background, because there's a lot of people that I talk with, and I'm starting to grow the podcast base, if you will. But over the course of the time that I've been in the trades, which I'm getting ready to start my 23rd year,
Oh
the
wow.
num
Okay.
the number of people that had grown up without knowing the trade or anything about the trade. Like you admitted earlier on that you said, okay, well, I didn't know anything about the union. I didn't know there was a difference. I'll take it a step further. A lot of people I talk to don't even know that the trades are a legitimate thing for you to actually get in and earn a good living for. And that's amazing to me because I've got multiple articles detailing this on the website. But as a guidance counselor, as a teacher, an educator, adults who are supposed to be well versed into your life and your success, the guidance counselor. When I unpack that name, you're supposed to provide guidance and you're supposed to provide counsel. Like it's a double whammy. And the idea that the vast majority of them are so bent on telling you you've got to go to college, or in our case, they tell you military, you got to go to college, and as if these are your only choices. And so I routinely ask people, I say, well, were you told anything about the trades? Did anybody tell you this? Were you aware? And most of the time they're like, nope, they didn't tell me this or whatever. But that's not the case for you. You grew up around them, which is good, I think, because number one, you got to see a good work ethic. But number two, you
Yes,
saw the value. And I bet you, I'm going to take a
yeah,
guess.
having a dad that's going out at 5, 6 in the morning and then 9, 10 at night, it's something else when he says, "Hey, get up, we're going to another job."
I bet your dad. So in my experience, there's two different types. There's the one that babies you, and then there's the other one that's like, I'm harder on you than the rest of the people that I work around, and that's probably
Yeah,
what he
that was
was.
my dad for sure, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? Kudos to him. That's the way that I am with my own kids, and that's a good thing to be as far as I'm concerned. Because if no one else is going to baby you, right? So when you get out into the real world, it's like, all right, well, I've had a taste of this, which is what fathers, in a lot of ways are supposed to do.
Right.
We're supposed to kind of get into that, but you've been around the trades, and so that's good because you were taught a work ethic. You were taught that, and you could see that the trades were right from the jump. They're a very viable option. I mean, your dad has a company, your uncle has one, is what I heard you say.
Yes.
That's pretty good. So when you first got in, you still did you want to do, let's say, residential? Were you aware of the commercial / industrial aspect of the whole thing, or kind of where's your head at when you first got in, and then even now, how is that looking for you?
Right. When I first got in, my dad was mostly just doing residential stuff. And so I've heard every now and then when he's talking on the phone to potential customers and things, I'd hear words like residential, commercial, industrial. I didn't know the difference between those words. I just figured, maybe it's on a larger scale. And to be fair, it is, but it's a different environment entirely.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it was just residential things that he had me working on. And even when I went to that open shop, it was just mostly residential stuff. Occasionally we go and do commercial things, but for the most part, it was a lot of service work. So now, even with my union, the jobs I'm on, both of them have been pretty big jobs. One of them was working on a school that's still currently underway. I'm just on a different crew now in a different location. And the other one is this supposed to be some sandwich manufacturing shop. They sell sandwiches to gas stations and stuff. It's a really big place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of the two, I think I prefer commercial work. I better. There's just so much more to learn, and it seems like you have more time to learn it. And since there are more people, there's more people from you or around to learn from, and I appreciate that a lot. With service work, it's if you're not going out on your own, and if you're a guy like me, then you're going with a journeyman. And sometimes, depending on the person you get, what you learn and how you learn can vary a lot. For example, with the open shop, sometimes it'd be, if you the guy would get their work done and then they come and bring you back and then they get to go home. And so sometimes it was like, all right, well, maybe today I'll get to learn a little bit more. And other times maybe the guy's in a rush and he needs to get home for whatever reason. And so it's difficult to learn what you need to learn in that environment sometimes. On the
Mm-hmm.
commercial jobs, the day ends, you have your 8-hour days, but you're gonna learn something. You have a lot of time to learn things.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that a lot more.
It's pretty awesome, man. So from my perspective, ironwork has a lot of facets too. I've never really cared for commercial work as much as I do industrial work. I've always industrial. You are right. You think, okay, well, it's different. It's the same thing, but it's not. It's a completely different environment, and that's from the pipe fitting, plumbing side, as well as the iron worker or the millwright or whatever trade you're in. I mean, it's just industrial is just a different thing. but it's duly noted, right? That you get a chance to, because the commercial jobs are probably, when you separate yourself from the service side of things, I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to say the commercial side, your job sites are probably, you probably have a lot more individuals there to learn from, a lot more people
Yes.
to go and swap crews or be a part of this crew today, and they're doing something completely different. And
Right.
I'm sure it's more advantageous for you in that regard. Correct?
Yes, it is very much.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I believe in the first our first email exchange, you're just finishing up your first year, correct?
That's correct. Our first year ended last month.
Okay. How was it first year? How was it for you? Was it good? Tell me about it.
It was good for the classroom portion, at least. I had a lot of fun. We had our instructor was a man named David Thurman. He's a real great guy. He's he looked out for me all the times, ensured that I understood what was going on. Anytime I had a question I could ask him for, he was always there and ready to help. He's always quick with a good joke or stuff too. He made learning a lot of fun. It wasn't just straight up, all right, this is what we're gonna read from the textbook or whatever. Every now and then he'd have a video to show us that was related to what we were talking about. And for the most part, the first year is just learning about the history of the union, whether it's our union, the UA in general, how unions work, and things like that. It's mostly just going through the history of it. On the tail end of it, there's some math and identifying materials like certain bolts and how to put in screws properly in flanges and things like that. But for the most part, it's just going through like, this is the union, this is what we do, this is how we got here, these are some of the important figureheads that fought and, died for a lot of the rights that we have now. And,
Mhm.
the ability for us to come together and bargain, earn a fair day's pay for a fair day's work.
Yeah. You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because I'm interested in your take on this. It's my belief that the vast majority of individuals today in the American workforce, I think labor history ought to be something that's taught to everybody. I think that when you and we iron workers do the same thing. They have a history as well. And if I had to guess, your history probably begins before the UA in the mines, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Um,
They were before UA was called that. They were, I believe, what did he call them? Craftsman guilds?
yeah.
It was something related to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they dated back pretty far before, UA was what it is today.
Right. And then, the American, let's say the American struggle, if you will, when we start looking at the basically the plight of the worker, the skilled tradesman, you know, I mean, there were kids that were going into the mines at 10 years old and younger. And, I just did a book. I'm working on a book review. There's a book that's out. It's a very fantastic book called 23 Things That They Don't Tell You About with Capitalism. And the very first thing he says is there's no such thing as the free market. And in the coal mines, he starts talking about this. And even in a cotton mill, he said, let me give you a good example of this.
Yeah.
In 1820, I think it was 1819 or 1820, he brings up this example. He says, in Parliament in England, they were talking about from ages up till 9 years old, banning you from working in the cotton mill altogether because the conditions were so horrid and dangerous. And if you were 10 to 16 years old, that you could work a maximum of 12 hours a day. And
Wow. Okay.
right, and that measure there, just in the cotton mills, and 9 years old and younger, no work, 10 to 16, 12 hours a day, that measure there was ultimately shelved and put off to the side because it was considered too controversial because it interfered with the quote unquote free market. You as
12
a
hour day for
That's
children. That's
right.
controversial. Wow.
Right. So there's this thought process behind the whole thing, and he says, look, there's no objective way to say this is a free market. It's all a farce. And this plays itself out, 120, 130 years ago when you look at the beginning, the history that you're talking about in the coal mines and then even into ironwork or the various things that we take for granted, the 40-hour work week, the weekends, no
Right.
child labor, all the things that we take for granted, every one of them somebody fought against and said this infringes into the free market. It's a bunch of bullcrap, but that's what they say. And so kudos to your instructor as well as the apprenticeship program as a whole, talking about the history, because I don't think it's talked about enough. We take a lot for granted here. we take a lot for granted that, okay, well, my child gets to, well, quite simply be a child and not have to contribute to the household bills by working in a, in a nasty coal mine or
Right.
whatnot for 12 hours a day. So that's good to hear that, you guys started off with history, because I think that's very important. I think that everybody needs to learn that. As a matter of fact, I think it needs to actually go out into the greater populace. And while you're not going to get the education system to explore that, maybe it needs to go out via podcasts and conversations and things like this. Let's talk about
I agree.
some of the history that needs to be explored a little bit. So
I think it would do well to help with the general respect of the trades too within society if more people knew how much of a struggle it was to get to where we are now. Like I said, even a lot of these stuff, like you said, the 4-day work week, the weekends and stuff, they're not things that benefit solely the trades. There
that's
are
right.
other workers out there and things who would get those same benefits.
But the
And I
trades,
think it'd be
yep,
important if they knew where they came from.
yeah, the trades were at the trades were, if you will, the tip of the spear. They were the ones who were just, I mean, pushing and pushing and pushing. And the reason why is because a lot of I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that it was their blood that was shed.
Yes, absolutely.
In the end of the day, it wasn't their blood, sweat, and tears. In all honesty, that pretty much brought, to a significant degree anyway, the various things that we get today. So that's, kudos to your program for doing that. Now, are you in a 5-year program or a 4-year program?
It's 5 years.
5-year program. Okay. So another article that I was writing, I'm working on this now. I just joined Reddit like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the major premise for me to join Reddit was to go to where people are already at. I mean, Reddit's just one gigantic forum, and
Yes.
communicate with people. Obviously, you and I have become acquainted because of it. And one of the things that I'm noticing is there are people who conflate and confuse trade school with registered apprenticeship programs. And I thought, well, maybe I need to write an article about this, because trade schools are different from your apprenticeship program. And
Yes, they are.
you're in a trade school program, you're paying them to teach you something. In a registered apprenticeship program, which is what you're in, they're paying you. You're going to get work experience. You're going to school. I don't know how your model works, whether it's weekends or block or whatever, but it's drastically different. So walk us through. You find out about UA Local 43, and then you go down and talk. And was that pretty smooth? And I'm sure it didn't take much convincing, because the retired member's already done the he's already done
He's
the
done
heavy
all the
lifting.
heavy lifting, really. Yeah. The first time I heard about trade school actually was when I was on that deployment in Africa. One of the other soldiers there with us that were helping to build things, he graduated from a trade school. And he didn't speak about it much. All he just seemed that anytime he talked about it, he seemed pretty peeved that yeah, he had to pay to go and do it. He's glad that he got the cert out of it, but he seemed a little bit upset that he had to pay to go for it. When it came to applying, it wasn't hard at all. I looked on the website for UA Local 43. I got the number for the office. I called the lady there, and if I remember correctly, she told me all I would need is, at least initially, a valid ID, so like a driver's license, high school transcripts to show that I graduated high school, and then after that, I come down, fill out an application, leave it there, and I need to take a test. I don't recall exactly what it's called. I want to say it was called like a PICAT test. I'm not completely sure. And it's just something that tests your math, reading comprehension, and one other thing. I want to say it had something to do with science. It probably was just regular science.
Hmm.
And I had to go down to a community college that's, what was like 5 minutes away from the hall, and go and take the test there. And I got my results back from that, which were a lot better than I was expecting. I'm always nervous whenever I have to do any kind of academic testing. I wasn't the best
Hmm.
student, so anytime I'm put back into class, it was like, okay, well, man, I kind of wish I paid attention a bit more. But fortunately, and I wonder if this is just because it's a trade thing, but all the questions on there are generally applied to the trades. So it's mostly math problems like, all right, if you have X, Y, and Z feet of 2x4s and you need to build this building, how much feet do you need to get? And it's for the science and applied math and stuff. they would put up diagrams, which were really just like blueprints. They look like blueprints, and they'd say, all right, if you're building from this side, how's it going to look if you look at it from this side, and things like that. And all of it were things that my dad taught me early on, actually, and gave me the experience and put me in front of. And a lot of it was just, okay, well, I've seen things like this before, or even if I haven't, it's like I've seen similar things to this, so I can apply it to this. And it's really pretty much the same. That wasn't too bad. I got high marks on that test. I brought it over to the apprenticeship, and all that was left after that was to do the interview. And the interview was what made me very nervous because on the day of the interview, I went out and I bought a new suit. I bought new shoes. It wasn't a very fancy suit or anything. It was cheap, but it looked nice. But you would be able to tell that, all right, I didn't go and get like Louis Vuitton or anything like that. But it was a decent suit. I went out and bought new shoes. I made sure that I went and got a haircut and everything. I sprayed on some cologne. I did everything I thought that, okay, maybe I should do this for an interview. I'm going to present myself. I need to be and look as best as I possibly can. And so I go over to their little office that they're holding everybody else in. And as I step into the room and I look around at everybody else there, I seriously thought that I messed up because everybody else I saw in there, or at least all the fellas, um, they had on jeans, cowboy boots, like nice
Hmm.
little dress cowboy boots, but they're still cowboy boots. And they had on a button shirt,
Yep.
tucked into their jeans and like a belt with a big buckle and everything. And I'm just freaking out because I was over here thinking like, wow, man, I'm going to an interview. I'm supposed to dress nice, show these people, I'm professional. I'm here. I'm ready to like, I'm taking this seriously. And then when I see all of them, I'm thinking I must have done something wrong. This is the South, right? Of course, I'm supposed to be dressing like these guys. I gotta come over here and I should have brought a cowboy hat or something. I should have had the same button-up shirts, the jeans, and everything. I look so out of place here, and I was just really freaking out about that because I was just thinking like, man, what if I go in there? And then, they just see me and they're like, oh, this is just some city kid coming down here. And it was just everything that every preconceived notion that I have is just going off firing because I'm different from everybody else. The way I'm dressed here is different from everybody else. And I'm thinking I did something wrong. And I get into it's too late now. I can't change. So I get into the interview room and I sit down there. Before I sit down, I shake everybody's hands. There were 5 members there, if I recall correctly. Shake everybody's hand, thank them for their time having me come in, and I sit down and I try to steel myself and I do the best I can. Fortunately, most of the questions they asked was just about my time in the military, so that's something I'm very comfortable talking about. So that
Hmm.
wasn't too big of a deal for me. And eventually they opened up my folder and whatever they got there, I assume it's my transcript, my military records that I handed them over. And apparently they did get the letter of recommendation that the retired member sent to them. I wasn't sure if it got to the right person or not. He just said that he sent it off, and I had to hope that they got it, and they did. They read it, and they asked me to tell them about. All right, well, how did you meet this individual? What was your relationship with them? They recommended you here, so obviously there's something there. And it told me that it's pretty rare for at least a new apprentice coming in who has no connection to anybody there or anything. I've only been living there for about 2 years at that point. Say, well, you got a letter of recommendation, everything looks good. That's pretty impressive. And that helped calm me down a lot. They were all real nice people. It wasn't too bad. I was expecting some kind of stare down. It wasn't like that at all. It was a nice little interview. They were real respectful. I made sure to give them that same courtesy back. I looked them in the eyes when I was talking to them. I spoke clearly, sat up straight, all the things that you should do.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, again, I looked them all in the eye, shook their hands again, said, thank you for your time. I really appreciate this opportunity that you're giving me here. And as I'm walking out, one of the gentlemen, he came over to me and he took me to the side a bit and he said, hey, I just want to tell you, I appreciate you coming down here in a suit. And it really makes you look professional and show that, you wanted to be here. A lot of these guys over here, I understand that we're tradesmen and our work isn't necessarily the prettiest, but you're still here for a job interview. We're still professionals. We still got to at least look the part, and I appreciate you coming down here in a suit and taking this seriously. And that made me feel like on top of the world. Because
Uh-huh.
here I am thinking, I overdressed for the part. I'm being a little too fancy with it. And you say, no, you're being a professional. You took this as seriously as the rest of us. I appreciate it. And he told me, even just a simple blazer, it goes a long way, just to showing that, you want to be here and you did everything possible. And after that interview, I got a call. I think it was 2 weeks later. Not a call, a letter. I got a letter. I still keep it somewhere around here in my room. And I just say, this is addressed to Jermaine Marshall. Congratulations, you've been accepted into UA Local 43 apprenticeship program. Here's where you're going to come in for orientation. This is when school's supposed to start, and things like that. And it made me really happy to get into that and to know that all that effort that I put forward to that, all the doubt that I had, it finally came, and here I am, where I wanted to be.
Well, I tell you, I think that's fantastic. There's a couple of points that really kind of register with me. The test. You mentioned that the math questions and whatnot, they had a more hands-on. Effectively, I want to ask you the question, but it's not just an abstract question. It's one that you can see why you would need it in the trade to some degree. And I think that is a very important distinction to make, because a lot of guys will come in, they're like, man, look, I didn't even want to be in high school. Why do I got to sit here and take the classes that I'm taking now in the apprenticeship program and whatnot? But when you tailor questions, if you will, to and make it seem like, okay, well, I can see why these questions are applicable to whatever it is that I'm
Right.
doing. It hits on a different level. So that makes sense to me. But the second thing that really registered to me was you mentioned that when you were, I don't want to say pulled off to the side, but when he came up to you and he said, we're professionals, that word there, I want to just kind of park on it for a second, because I think that many, many, many tradesmen and women in this country, we dismiss the idea outright that we're something more. I'm just a plumber. I see this all the time. I'll talk to people who might have aspirations of owning their own company or whatever, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm just an iron worker." I'm going, "No, listen. The second
Yeah,
that you
you're so much more than that, man. Like you're
that's
literally building the nation around us. Everything somebody built,
that's right,
those buildings you go through, even the Walmart, the mom and pop stop that you go through, people built that. We built that.
yeah." Trying to say like you are so much more than a just, because it makes it sound just derogatory coming out of your mouth.
Right.
I'm just a pipe fitter. I'm just an iron worker. I'm just no. You are a professional. You are a professional. And just like my website, when you first go to the website and you bring up the homepage, it'll say that we, the brand, if you will, advocates for the pay and the respect to be commensurate or equal to the level of importance that tradesmen and women bring to the country on a daily basis.
Right.
If you said today, okay, well, we're going to end fashion, or we're going to end the gaming industry, or we're going to end, some
Hey, don't
other
come for my
industries.
games. I love those.
And I'm not trying to take, like I got Attack on Titan back here, so I'm not, dismissing or discounting. I'm just saying that the country would continue to
Right.
run without that. But if you could wave a magic wand and have every skilled tradesman and women go to the house for 2 weeks on, like a purpose strike, saying we want more respect or whatever, the country would come to a grinding halt,
Absolutely.
a
Absolutely it
grinding
would.
halt. And so it's not to really bring up the power so much as it's to bring up the importance that you bring to the trade and to the country as a whole. And with that importance comes the fact that we're professionals. And that's where I think a lot of registered apprenticeship programs and various trades in general are trying to, kind of push that perspective that you're a professional. And so I think it's excellent that they specifically mention that, because we don't talk about that enough. I don't think we talk about that enough in that regard. So kudos to them for basically highlighting the fact that, you know what, Jermaine, you're a professional.
Right.
Welcome to the game. You're a professional now. So I think that's great. When you were graduating high school, I ask every apprentice this. Were you told, I mean, you already knew about the trades, but I am curious, how many, if any, of your educators, your teachers that you might have been respectful with or had open dialogue, or guidance counselors, did any of them openly say, "Hey, here's an option"? Because they all bring you in. They go, "What do you want to do for a living?" And I get my own unique take on this. I think that's a very bad question to ask. I think that what we ought to be telling young people is you need to pursue opportunity. It's not about what you want to
Right.
do. You could sit here and tell me you want to do some kind of some crazy idea. It doesn't really matter. Can you do it? Is
Yeah.
there an opportunity to do it? So I am curious about whether or not guidance counselors and whatnot, educators specifically in your life when you were coming up, were like, hey, here's an opportunity for you, or how that conversation and dialogue went about.
I did have one. She was my English teacher, and I want to say that blame her first. I think that she just didn't have the information that she needed.
Mm-hmm.
But when it did come time for me to talk to her, what do you want to do? And I told her I wanted to be a plumber. And like I said, that's about as far as I knew of it. Like I said, I didn't know about, unions, open shop, any of that. I just know that I want to be a plumber. If nothing else, I want to be a plumber. And she said, great. And she took, after the end of that class, she took me over to a computer room and started looking at colleges. And that's why I say I don't blame, that's why I say, I know, this is why I say I don't blame her,
Right.
because she immediately went to colleges and she thought, okay, well, maybe a college has a way to get you to that, rather
Right.
than even if she would have mentioned a trade school or a union. I think that she just wasn't aware of it, especially because in the South, unions aren't that strong. So I don't blame her for not, telling me that, hey, trade school is a thing you can do, or a union is a thing you can go to. I think she genuinely just didn't know. And, like you said, college is the thing that's always pushed
Mm-hmm.
as the answer. And so she figured in her mind, okay, well, he wants to go be a plumber. I'm sure there's a college out there somewhere that has something to do with that. And, she took me and we looked at colleges that had programs for that. There were really programs for the trades. There are other things, um, mostly like engineering things.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I don't blame her for it. I think she just didn't have the information that she needed for it, is all. The only thing in our school, though, in our high school, is we had a shop class for welding and, other ironwork things. That's something that I wasn't aware of until my senior year. And it wasn't until like late in my senior year either, when I was already getting ready to go on and graduate. So it's not like that's something I could have, or it's not something I could have taken advantage of at that time.
I think you're giving her due credit because she just doesn't know. As a matter of fact, on my contact page on the website, I'm like, hey, there is at least one professor. I think I have to look back at the email subscription list before when I push out articles, but I think it's at least one professor that is subscribed. And even on the contact page, I've got a bullet point. It's like, are you an educator and you're looking for other, let's say opportunities or avenues to push kids to? Because
Right.
college tuition is, $1.77 trillion dollars.
Well, it's a lot
Uh,
of money.
yeah,
That's for
and
sure.
more to the point of the guy that you were working around over there in Africa, where he was like, "Yeah, I had to pay for trade school, and he's got a chip on his shoulder." I get it, because there's another viable option and another viable model that has been the golden standard, which is a registered apprenticeship program for decades now. It's regulated by the Department of Labor. It has churned out some of the best professional tradesmen and women this country has ever seen, and we need more of it.
Absolutely.
So that's very interesting that they say that. And by the way, every apprentice that I have on here all says the same thing. It's college. It's college.
Yeah,
It's
because it
pushing
is
college.
just even from your kid. That's where it's all. That's where all of it's supposed to lead up to.
Yeah, and they intuitively just kind of tell you. Even if you come up to them, I had one guy on here where he was, he wanted to do something else besides college, and they were like, "Well, we'll talk later," like just kind of, pushing it off a little bit
Yeah,
and
that's
saying, "Okay,
always where it is
mhm.
too. It's no matter what, you have to at least go to college. Anything you want to pursue afterwards, that's completely up to you. But you have to go through college. You
And
have to
it's
go and get your degree, and then anything you want to do afterwards, that can come later. That seems to be always where the conversation goes.
yeah, you know what? It's funny because the major reason that I started the Apprentice Spotlight series is because, look, there's a lot of gray in this beard. I don't really care about all that stuff, but I know that younger people are probably not necessarily going to listen to me as well as they might listen to you when you share this podcast episode out. Hey, look, I heard the same thing. I'm in my mid 20s. I heard the same thing about you got to go to college, but guess what? You don't have to, and you push it out there. So it's one of the reasons why I started the
Right.
Apprenticeship Spotlight series to give people, number one, give apprentices the ability to stand up on this platform and share their story, but also be able to share it out to reach other people who are younger. because as you're listening to the podcast episodes, I've got a small mini series called Lies That We Tell Young People. And when you get to it, you'll be like, oh man, he's talking, because I tell lies like you got to go to college to get a good job. Another lie that we tell young people is that by the age of 18, you should know what you want to do for a living. Like for the rest of your
That's
life.
a big one.
For the rest of your life, you ought to know. And it's like, well, you've probably worked from 16 to 18, so 2 years, part-time basis. You have no real substantive work experience. How on earth are you supposed to be able to say with certainty that this is what you want to do for the rest of your life? And I'm going, why do we tell young people this? So it's crazy to me.
Oddly enough, that was the reason, that specific reason is why I joined the Army, which, in case anybody's listening, don't join the Army because you don't know what you want to do. Okay? Have a good idea of what the military is about before you just jump into it. I did it for a very silly reason. I was close to graduating high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, I knew I wanted to go into plumbing. I just didn't know how to get there, and I just didn't have a plan. So I figured, let me go join the Army, get some time, and see where things go from there. Don't do that. Try and formulate a plan before you commit to signing, 4 or 5 years, however long you stay there for. Fortunately for me, it worked out, but have a plan before that. But yeah, at 18, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. When I was going through training, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until halfway through our deployment that I figured, okay, I know what I want to do and I have a plan to get there. And here I've even found some resources to be able to get there. It took a lot for me to figure that out. It wasn't just, I graduated high school. Now there's a light bulb going, oh, this is what I'm going to do.
We actually, the trades actually have a program. So I think it's, I'll second your statement here. Okay, look, if you're listening or you're watching, depending on how you're consuming your content, I wouldn't necessarily advise joining the Navy or the Army or any of the branches just because you don't know what you want to do. As a matter of fact, the podcast episode and the article that I push out is like, look, if you don't know what you want to do for a living, just go get a job. Like legit, just go get a job. Get into the workforce, because the likelihood is you're going to go, the job that you first get, you're going to be like, well, this job sucks. I don't like this job. So and then it's meant to prompt you, right? To go and go, well, what do I want to do? Because a lot of times in high school, our parents and adults, everybody's busy. So no one, for the most part anyway, at least all the conversations I've had, no one really helps younger people go, let's look at the data.
Right.
Let's look at jobs. Let's look at opportunities, not what you want to. And so, it's not advisable to go and just join the military. But for those of you who are potential, going to just do your 4 or 5 years or however long you're going to be in there, we do have a program called Helmets to Hard Hats.
I used that program actually when I came back. That's the
awesome
program I went through, and that's how I really get pretty much guaranteed into the union, actually.
Yeah, we need a complete reset in the way that, number one, the way we evaluate trades, but also from a pay and respect perspective, but also the way that I wouldn't say the way we recruit and we talk about taking care of people in the trades. A lot of times you'll hear companies and complete industries just pay lip service and say these different things. And I'm going, well, there are really crystal clear ways that if you are serious and sincere about respecting the trades, I think that the registered apprenticeship model should be, just completely it should explode with interest. We are beset with what I would say is a skilled trade shortage. This is going to be a good segue into my next question about, what facet of work you like to do and what you're seeing on the job. But I'm going to make it a prediction. You're probably seeing on your job, you're what, mid-20s, correct?
23.
All right. So you're relatively, you got your whole life ahead of you. What you're probably seeing on the job is 20 to, let's say, 30-year-olds. And then for the most part, you're seeing 50 plus. So
yes.
you are seeing that. Okay. Yeah. So that every apprentice I've ever talked to in the past 5-10 years, every journeyman that I've ever talked to, every job sites that I've been on, that's the case. And so what that's going to create then is this enormous gulf in experience. And in a decade, we're going to have significant problems. And I think we ought to hit the reset button and reevaluate the way that we look at doing trades. But on those jobs, when you're talking and doing everything, is there a specific facet of your trade that you enjoy more than others? What do you enjoy most about the trade? in the time you've been in?
I enjoy it most. I'd say I don't know if it's I don't say that it's specific to my trade in particular. I think it's a trade thing in general, but it's just doing things with my hands, knowing that I can be left alone to put something together and whether it's having a journeyman over me or maybe this is a small enough thing that I can do it by myself, is being able to create something with my hands, put it in place, and then when it all comes together, like for instance, it's plumbing, when you turn on the gas or you turn on the water, everything just flows together. It
Hmm.
goes and it hits every pipe, and you know that all of your work, everything that you just, struggled, you spent your days, putting together, cursing at, whatever, all of that work, it's just working so well. And even if there's something wrong, maybe there's a leak or something, you can identify, you can see what's wrong with it, and you know that you have the knowledge and the ability to go and fix it. You don't need to, you might need to go online for some of them, but for the simpler stuff, you can go over there, look at it and say, all right, it's leaking here. Why is it leaking here? What do I need to fix it? Oh, I have the tools to fix it. I can take care of that right now. You don't need to go and do anything extra or cost the job anymore. You have the ability and the knowledge to just fix it right then. I just love working with my hands. It's great when you can see something be put together and know that I did that, or me and my team did that, or I coached somebody to be able to do that, or I gave them the advice they needed to do that. It's a great feeling.
Job satisfaction.
Absolutely.
Job satisfaction. The trades routinely have one of the highest rates of job satisfaction that are out there because as it turns out, when you work in an office and you don't really see any tangible results day in and day out, you feel like you're droning on and on. You don't feel like you're
Right.
accomplishing anything. You don't feel like you're effective, whatever. But multiple times when I've had conversation with different people in the trade, they're like, "Look, I worked with my hands." And you know what's ironic to me is I was talking about this with someone else the other day. My kids have this ginormous box of Legos, and they're
Awesome.
they're playing and they're like, "Look at what I created." I'm like, it starts from when we're very young.
Right.
And more often than not, what we do is we go, you don't want to work with your hands when we become adults. I'm like, why? Why are we stifling the creativity? Why are we trying to stamp out this vestige of humanity that likes to create, that's tactile, likes to do
Right. You
things?
just look
And
all around you. Somebody had to create that. Somebody had to come up with the idea for it, and they had to get people together to say, you know what? I want to build that. That's something that looks good to me. I want to do that. And I don't, like you said, I don't think it's a good thing when people come and they see them making things as kids. And even if it's something that doesn't make sense to you as an adult, I think it's more of the principle. Your kids over there, they're making something with their
that's right.
hands and they're showing it to you. Now, if you don't understand it or whatever, that's fine. They're kids. But that's something important to them. It's like, look what I made. I did this. I did this on my own. This is something I put my hands on.
Yep.
And it's something that I'm here to show you that, look, I did that. And I don't think you should discourage that kind of creativity.
Yeah, I think our school system in general. I think it may not have initially been created to do this, but I think over time, what has effectively happened is we're looking to basically stamp out your creativity and stamp out your love of learning. And I just want you to root memorization. I don't want you to be creative. And I think that I think that extends into adulthood because you got all these people who think that the only avenue is to go to college. And it's like, I don't, and I'm trying to, shine a spotlight, if you will, on the fact that there is a whole complete avenue that has been kept in the dark. And it feels extremely intentional.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, think about it. You're getting a whole bunch of people from the time they're kids to at least until they're in high school. You're sitting them in a desk for 8 hours a day, more than that
Mm-hmm.
if they need extra tutoring.
Yep.
And you're telling them, all right, look on the board here, memorize these facts, and then here's a test. And they bubble in their answers and they brain dump that knowledge for the next set, and then it just keeps on going like that.
Yep.
And you're not doing much, you're telling them, all right, memorize this, go out there and memorize more stuff. Yeah, I tell them, you need to take this information and see how you can apply it to other avenues of your life, maybe create something or figure out another solution to a problem. It's just that- that's part of the reason why I didn't do well in school. I didn't like sitting there just
Mm-hmm.
doing nothing really.
Yeah.
I wanted to be out, I wanted to move around, do things with my hands, go outside, do stuff.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you, man. I think that's fantastic. I could go off on a number of rabbit trails in our conversation to talk about some of the what I would say are pet peeves or pet discussion points, but I'm going to try to corral my own self and ask this question: what's your least favorite thing about the trades?
Least favorite thing. Oof.
Because let's just be honest. You know what I mean? Because I can, I've got some things on my side. I've had some apprentices, highlight their own, and I just want to give fair value. I want people to listen or watch and make their own assessment. But let's talk about, because some guys don't like being dirty, and I've seen. I mean, like some guys look like Pigpen. I mean, they just are just like dirt magnets, bro. But what is yours? What's the least favorite thing for you,
Uh,
Jermaine?
Least favorite, I'd say, and it's probably just because I'm younger than a lot of guys on my crews and stuff. I think my least favorite thing, being in the trades, is sometimes your voice just isn't given consideration. Whether it's you're ignored entirely, or even if you're heard, it seems like you're easily dismissed. And I get it. I'm young. It's my first year of the trades and stuff. I understand that there may be some things that I don't understand, and that's why my suggestion might not be as helpful. But I'd rather you tell me, hey, this is why we can't do something, rather than you saying, you're just an apprentice, or you're just the first year, or whatever, or you're young, and just dismissing me out of hand. I like to know that my voice is in there somewhere, with a suggestion, trying to, you hear it all the time, you want people to come up with solutions to a problem. And here's a guy who comes in, here's a possible solution. Even if it's not the best one, it's a solution. And, that being in your head might think, all right, his solution wasn't the best, or maybe it was wrong for this reason, but it got some creative juices flowing. And now here's another solution that I hadn't considered before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard, you go through, and growing up, people tell you, don't lose sight of that creativity or whatever. And you try to give some feedback or solutions to things, and you're just dismissed out of hand.
So here's a real challenge going forward for you when it comes to that, is that as you progress, through the trade and you become a journeyman, all too often, those same journeymen that are doing the same thing to you now, dismissive or whatever, I'm sure that when they first got into the trade, they had the same complaints. But there's something that happens over the course of multiple years. We finish up, we get done, cut our teeth, as it were, and now we're journeymen. And what happens is they just completely fall right in lock and step with the same thing that they were complaining about. So
I agree.
as you're going through your apprenticeship and you get done, and now you're the one that's, let's say, on the hook for the responsibility, the difficulty is going to be, okay, I need to make sure that I remember what it was like as an apprentice and my voice was
Mhm.
dismissed, and then make sure that I'm bringing people in, and I want your input. It's going to be, it'll be a struggle, because it's so easy, I think, to fall into lockstep just the same way everybody else does it. This is the way we're doing it. That's it. You're young, you don't know anything, etc.
Right.
It takes a little bit more intentionality on your part when you become a journeyman to so that's going to be the challenge for you, I think. And if you're aware of it, at least you're a step ahead of, I think, of everybody else when it comes to it. So keep that in mind when you're going through the
I
apprenticeship.
definitely will. Because at least, and this is jumping over to our military side a little bit. I'm a sergeant, so I have some soldiers under my care. I have three of them. Fortunately for me, they're all very intelligent and really smart. They don't, at least in my opinion, need too much direction.
Right.
But I've had times where before I was a sergeant, I was a junior enlisted, where same thing, my thoughts were dismissed out of hand. And, I think it's worse in the Army that, this is how we've always done it. So this is how we're going to keep doing it. But being a new sergeant and going through the school and learning how to communicate with people more, I don't have a problem listening to when they're telling me things. They're telling me like, "Hey, Sergeant, here's a way that you can do it." Especially since I'm going through to get trained for a new job, they already know it. So anytime they tell me anything, I'm ready to listen because it's likely something that I don't already know. And whatever they tell me is only going to help me and help me make me better. So I'm always ready and always open to hear any of whatever they're talking about, whether it's a complaint or it's just anything really. They're talking to me, I'm here listening to them.
Well, that's going to serve you well. Not only will it serve you well in the Army, but it's also going to serve you well in life in general. A lot of people don't really, it's very difficult to talk to someone who's outright dismissive and is not interested and or willing to take constructive criticism or input from somebody else. It takes a level of humility, I think, to be able to sit here and say, okay, I don't know everything, and therefore, because I don't, you may have something to say that's worth not just listening, but may have long-term positive ramifications. So it's going to serve you well in the Army. It's going to serve you well in life. And it certainly is going to serve you well as you, what I'm going to say is you're going to finish your apprenticeship. And as you rise, whether, it's whether you rise from, let's say, a journeyman to what's likely to happen is foreman and on up the ranks, and even the potential for, let's say, an officer role at the local or whatever, it's all going to be beneficial for you. And that level of intentionality is going to be, it's going to be so massive when you stop and think about it, after so many years have passed, and you look at the way you operate, and you're intentional about listening to other people, and you're intentional about, while I may not adopt what they're saying, at least I'm giving ear to what they're talking about.
Right.
That level of intentionality is so rare in a lot of people, and that ability that you're going to display, as well as your perspective of, okay, I'm a professional, is going to serve you very, very well. I think you'll find out years later, if you ever stop to think about it, you'll think to yourself, oh, you know what? It has served me well. I think it's going to serve you very, very well in your career. So it's very good. How about mentors? Do you have mentors? Because I know there's a lot of apprentices. When I was coming up, just to segue into this, a little introduction, there were a lot of guys who would complain about not having mentors. They would complain about not having mentors. A lot of iron workers or whatever would say, okay, they may not openly say this, but guys knew it to be true. Okay, well, they don't want to train up. They think we're going to take their jobs. They don't want to talk to us. They're very against bringing guys in. But at the end of the day, no matter what people think about young people, you guys are the future. And if you don't come up and you're not mentored and you're not taught the right way to do things and you're not taught a level of professionalism, who's going to pay for the pension system? Who's going to pay, and continue the trade? And so, and by the way, if you haven't heard yet, there is a fantastic book out there called The 5-Minute Foreman. I did a book review on it. I know who the author is, Mark Breslin. It's a fantastic book. It's worth time to look it up and even purchase it and getting into it. And one of the talking points is kind of where I kind of got the question from, is he was standing in a room full of what he calls construction professionals, which is exactly what they are. Many of the construction professionals end up managing far more money than their white collar counterparts. And he says, how many of you guys were mentored at some point in your career? And about 70% of their hands go up. And then he says, well, that's great. How many of you guys are mentoring? And only about 30% of the hands are coming up. And so that's a systemic problem. And so on the heels of that, the question remains, do you have mentors? And if so, what's that relationship been like? What have you learned?
I definitely do. I'm fortunate that they've so far been very positive. One of mine is the foreman on the job that I'm currently on, actually. He's provided me some good feedback. My first week there, apparently there were some problems that one of the other guys had with me. I wasn't aware with it. That guy didn't bring it up to me, but I suppose he brought it up to his foreman, and the foreman took me aside at the end of the workday and told me that, it wasn't anything that I was doing bad on the work itself that I was doing. It was just me, my pace moving from, point A to point B. I'm naturally a slow walker, and I tend to walk that way unless I have something like completely urgent to do. So he just brought me to the side and made sure to tell me, you're doing well out here. Just when you're moving from point A to point B, move those legs a little faster. You'll be doing all right. I took that advice and I did that. It's taken some adjustment, but I'm getting to where I need to go. And I've appreciated that about him. And another thing that he does is whenever there's new people that come onto the site, he'll always shuffle them around a little bit because what he told me is he likes to try and find who works best with who. Not necessarily like, all right, I need you to fill this space. I need this body over here. It's all right, does this person have a good relationship or a good working relationship with this person?
Yeah.
All right, does this person not have that? All right, let me move them over here. And he'll kind of play around with the dynamics of the people on the team until everybody kind of fits where they're supposed to be. And they have a good work ethic together. They work well together. And I appreciate that about him. He's done that with me a couple of times. He's put me with a crew now that I think I've really found my stride with. We work well together. And aside from my foreman, is some of the other workers. There's a welder there that I've been working with recently, and he was TIG welding, I believe, some stainless pipe. And he had to leave early, but he told me, he handed me over the tools that he was working with, and he pointed me to a scrap piece of stainless pipe and said, "All right, go over there and practice on that." And fortunately, he didn't have the time to, walk me through the process because he had to leave. It was an emergency. But he said, go over there, practice on that, see what you can figure out. And then, next week we'll go over and we'll talk about it some more. And I appreciate that. That's very helpful because, I'm going through as a plumber. And at least as far as I'm aware, that's not part of my education, at least not this early in the apprenticeship. So I appreciate that he's bringing me over and giving me the chance to work on something that I could possibly later on down the line get a certification for, make myself more competitive um, to employers. And I just appreciate that. Most of the guys that I've been working with, they're all very good. They're very much willing to get me up to speed to where they are so that I can keep working with them.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic that somebody, a lot of times apprentices just need a shot. I just need, somebody to give me an opportunity to learn.
Right. That's really all this because that's what we're here for. That's the whole point of the apprenticeships to go through and learn. And so that's the biggest thing is just finding somebody to say, hey, come over here for a second. Let me show you how to do this. Or they'll even ask you, hey, do you know how to do this? No, I've never done that before. I don't know how to do it. All right, well, get over here. You're going to learn how to do it today. Or you're going to at least learn the basics so I can help you build up that skill set.
Yeah, those people. So I've been an apprentice instructor for at least 15 years now. And people like that are like, hey, you know how to do this? No, well, come on over here because today you're going to learn today.
Right.
Those people are worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm willing to give you a shot. So I think it's fantastic. So we're down to our couple last questions here. How has the trade affected your life?
It has made it better. That's why that for certain. Especially just coming from an open shop over to union. Um, my workplace did find out at some point that I was going to go over to union. I don't know. I think one of the guys who was sitting on the board was friends with my boss that ran the company, and they talked. Fortunately, it didn't, result in anything negative to me. But I went in, one of my supervisors, he made a little joke and said, "Oh, you're going over to union? Well, I hope you're ready for that pay cut." And that didn't get me because I was talking to the guy who was initially talking to me about unions on that job. I knew that wasn't true, but he made a little joke about it, and really that was it. And the funny thing is, even going through that interview, the guy on the board, one of the guys on the board said the same thing. You're gonna be, hey, you're gonna be getting paid 17.60 here. I hope that's not too big of a pay cut for you. And I looked at it, and I told her like, I'm making $16 over there. It's $1.60. I'll take it every single time.
Yeah.
And it's added a lot of stability to my life. It's removed some uncertainty of, all right, well, am I going to get the amount of my 40 hours this week? Or am I going to be paired with a journeyman, who's just coming in today, wants to get the job done, go home. And then, I'm going to be at the shop just, kind of sitting around there. And it's nice to know that at least every year, my pay will go up a little bit. I'm always being offered new certifications like our union. I think it's every Saturday, I believe. They hold, weld tests, weld practice tests, you know, everything that you need. There's some rigging courses, and they just offer you a lot of things. If you want to be better, it's there for you. They're not gatekeeping it. They're not, coming over saying, well, we really can't send you because of X, Y, and Z reason, or you're just the first year, so you don't need this or anything. It's if you want to be better, you can be better. And they're giving you every opportunity to do that. And it's definitely given me the drive to say, like I said, they're giving me that opportunity. I'm going to be there to take it every time. And I really appreciate that about it.
That's a really good. I want to talk about that before I get into this last question. You brought up something I think that kind of kicked something off in my head. That pay cut thing. I think one of the things that younger people in general, or anybody, as a matter of fact, that's thinking about becoming a journeyman pipe fitter, a journeyman iron worker, a journeyman electrician, or whatever, that statement, you're going to take a pay cut, is a little disingenuous. And the reason why is because it doesn't take into account all of your benefits.
That's completely true.
And we go, a lot of guys, if they're coming from an open shop or a non-union side, or if they're young, they say, well, you're going to take a pay cut because you're going to come in here. Let's say, for example, and I'll make this situation up, but let's say that they were paying you $20 an hour. And you go, okay, well, I hope you're ready for that pay cut because you're going to make 17 something an hour. But what they're not telling you, and what they don't want to tell you because they don't want to be open and transparent, is that on top of your pay is going to be your health and welfare, or your health insurance, your pension contribution, and I'm going to make an assumption that you're getting an annuity fund as well.
Yes.
Yes. Which, for those of you who may not know, an annuity fund is just it's like a Union Crafts 401k. So he's got, on top of his pay, he's got a pension, he's got a health and welfare, or health insurance, and he's got a 401k. That's on top of his pay. So when somebody says, hey, I hope you're ready for that pay cut, they're not taking all of those various benefits into account. Most of the people who are getting paid, they might say, well, you're going to get $30 an hour if you stay here a couple more years. But out of that $30 an hour, you're also going to take out your health care, and you're going to take out whatever kind of retirement account you've got. That's not the case when you join a registered apprenticeship program through, or with a union employer.
That's right. All that is paid into it.
That's right. It's all negotiated into it. And when they say you make, and I'm assuming that your raises are probably every 6 months.
It's about 6 months, yeah. Six to a year.
Roughly 6 months to a year, depending. Every time you get a raise, that money goes into your pocket. You're not taking money out of it to then pay your health care, to pay your retirement. It's all on top of it. And I've said this multiple times. I say it on the podcast. I say it on websites, in articles, and in various forums, whenever over on Reddit and whatnot. But I'm always telling people, registered apprenticeship programs are one of the best kept secrets, but they shouldn't be.
Absolutely.
Which is,
you're telling everybody you can about it.
That's
especially if they're younger people who aren't too sure what they want to do. That's a great thing for them to do. If for nothing else, because they'll get hands-on experience, they'll get certifications, and when you go in and you do trade work, you're just doing your trade, but it's not the only one you learn. You're likely going to be working with, I'm a plumber. I work around pipe fitters. I work around electricians, people who do HVAC. I work around all types of people.
Yep. And that's a really good segue into the last question I got for our conversation. This has been really good. Maybe after some time passes, we'll reconvene and say, okay, tell me what your second year's been like. But the last question for today, if you had, because you do have a platform, and when this is all edited out, I don't do a whole lot of editing at all. I just take like the breath sounds out of the microphone, stuff like that. I don't really, I don't do the choppy videos. I can't stand it. But when this is done, you'll be able to share this out on your social media, and I'm going to obviously put it out on what I've got. But you've got a platform. What would you tell young people coming up now? You're a lot closer to them in age than I am. So what would you say, man? What would you tell them?
I mean, initially it would be like you said, if there's an opportunity, go and chase it. But for myself, I'd say stack the cards in your favor as much as you can. And I did that, and I did it unintentionally. You know, I went and joined the army. I was a volunteer firefighter. After that, I went and worked for a moving company. I did a whole lot of things between the time I graduated high school and the time I got into the union. And all of those things were I didn't figure they would factor into me getting in at all. But, when time comes to look at my resume or whatever's in that folder, I had a long list of things that showed I'm the guy for the job. And I think that plays into what you say about going in and getting work experience if you don't know what you want to do. Go out and get a job, show you people that, I've been out in the workforce. I'm doing X, Y, and Z things. And at the very least, I'm more qualified than this person, or I'm deserving of this opportunity that you're presenting. It's not going to be a bad idea for you to take a chance on me. So, if there are 100 people in the room all looking for a job, at least at the very minimum, you should be more qualified than that 100th person. So anything that you can. If it's going to get in a cert, going out into the workforce, anything you can do to show that, I want to be the one that you consider for that opportunity, or I should be the person that gets that opportunity. Whatever you can do to make an employer look at you and say, you know what, that's the person that I want to be here. And once you do it, put out when you're hired for that job, do that job. You just go in there and, dilly dally the whole day and do what does my generation call it? Quiet quitting, I believe. Don't just, if you're going to go and work, show up. And if it does turn out that, this isn't the job I want, or this isn't the job that, is giving me what I think I need, yes, go and look for another job, but don't make your current job suffer for it. Don't put pride into the things you do. So just, that's all I'd say is just put yourself in the best position possible to get to where you want to go. Even if that's not where you're at currently, just every decision you make, try and be your best at it.
Wise advice, beyond your years. I can tell you that. It'll serve you very well. Well, look, man, I'm going to end the podcast here. I'm trying to, when I first started this, I thought, well, I'll keep the podcast episodes to about 30 minutes, but I cannot do it when I'm doing interviews. There's just too much to talk about. And my name is not Joe Rogan, but if he can put out 3-hour podcast and millions of people listen, then people can listen to, let's say, about an hour or so podcast.
Right.
Where 2 people are talking about something that has the potential to change a person's life. So I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you reaching out to me from the connection and the post on Reddit. I will compile this together. I'll get it edited out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, whenever the case may be. I'll get it to you. I'll shoot you an email over on Instagram. I'll let you know when it's going to be dropping. Kind of give you a heads up, and you can share it. And I really appreciate it, brother.
That's right. I appreciate it too, and thank you for letting me be on here. And the cool little Attack on Titan posters you got back there. I know it wasn't the point or anything, but I did want to bring it up and say those are cool posters that you got there. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come in and talk with you, share my story, and I'd love to do it again sometime. Like you said, maybe later on after my second year or so.
I would love to. I would love to do that. In addition, when you go back to school, even on social media, just share it out, because I'm always, and I mean this, I need to create a PDF and send this out on the social platforms. But I would, right now I'm in a cadence of once a week dropping podcast episodes, and many of them right now are just me talking, and I still plan on doing those once a week. But if I had enough interest, I would do podcast episodes 2 or 3 times a week if I could get, in the afternoon or evenings, more apprentices that are willing to come on and talk. I know a lot of them don't know that the platform is out here yet, but the more that we have conversations like this and the more that we share it out on social media platforms, I know that there's going to be an increased interest, if you will. And so
right.
I would ask that you do that, right? Just tell everybody, hey, look, I had a good time. Let's have a conversation. That's what we need to do. We don't talk enough.
Exactly.
And we don't talk enough I think, in this country anymore. We don't have substantive and, real life-changing conversations, and we need to have some more of those. So, all right, man. Well, look, I'm gonna hit the stop button here in a couple seconds, but I really appreciate you taking your time, man. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you again for having me on.
It means a lot. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.